welcome everyone to the latest webinar in our our Engineerica education keynote series. This is our first keynote of 2023. We usually skip January, so welcome and happy February. I can't believe it's February already. We are so pleased to be bringing you this complimentary presentation. For those of you who are new to us, Engineerica specializes in academic center management systems for higher education. You may be familiar with our software applications such as AccuTrack, Accudemia, and AccuCampus. And of course, I want to give a special welcome to any Engineerica clients joining us today. And for those of you who are not yet clients, I do want to just quickly let you know we are offering a complimentary fall trial of our most popular system, Accudemia. This gives you an opportunity to use Accudemia for an entire semester risk-free to see if it helps make management of your center and your data collection easier. And if you're interested, you can send me an email at rachelc@engineerica.com. We started this keynote series for our clients and contacts who wanted to learn more about best practices and trends in higher education. Each month, we feature a distinguished speaker to talk about hot topics in the academic support field. And we will make an announcement through email and social media when registration opens for our next keynote. So do be on the lookout for that. A quick introduction to myself as your MC. I'm Rachel Cook. I'm a client success manager with Engineerica. I was previously a learning center manager for 6 years. So like you, all of you, I am very passionate about higher education student success. I do also have with me Garrett Effers. He's one of our technical support specialists. He's here at as my backup and also to help with any technical issues that come up for us, the speaker, or for all of you. And I am very pleased to introduce you to this month's speaker. Dr. Elizabeth Coghill has served as the inaugural director of the Pirate Academic Success Center at East Carolina University for the past 15 years. Dr. Coghill's professional experiences include learning support services, academic advising, registrar, systems training, career services, and admissions. Her research and practice interests focus on educational access, academic success, and sense of belonging of marginalized student population, neurodiverse learners, students of color, first generation, economically disadvantaged, and military affiliated students. She is an early adopter of universal design for learning techniques embedded within a campus learning center. Dr. Coghill is an invited speaker and advocate for neurodiverse students in higher education. She is a past president of the Southeastern College Learning Center Association and serves as the leader of the Mid-South region of the College Reading and Learning Association, or CRLA. She was awarded the Lifetime Learning Center Leadership Certificate from the National College Learning Center Association, or NCLCA, in 2021. Additionally, she is co-editor and author of Supporting Neurodiverse College Student Success, a guide for librarians, student support services, and academic learning environments, a Rowman and Littlefield publication, excuse me. We are very lucky and very excited to have Dr. Coghill with us, and I will now be handing things over to her. So let me go ahead and make you a presenter, and
Beautiful.
We can start your wonderful presentation.
You see that? Please don't say no.
No, not yet.
I got it. Now? Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
That is wonderful news. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to get to talk with you today a little bit about something that's really important to all of us, and that is working with at-risk students, but more specifically with neurodiverse students in higher ed. Some of my goals today is really for us to be able to have an exploration of our roles in our centers and be able to look as higher education leadership in ways that we can better support neurodiverse student success. In today's webinar, I'm going to first touch on some foundational concepts surrounding neurodiversity. This might be a repeat of something you do know, but I know that probably many of you that have joined this webinar today may not know some of the definitions. So we'll start there so that we're all in the same place in terms of foundation. And then we're going to touch a little bit on examining some of the characteristics of neurodiverse students on our campuses and discuss the ways that we as higher education leaders can better support neurodiverse students on our campus. And more recently, in some meetings I had this week, is recognizing and moving our campuses to recognize that neurodiversity and neurodiverse students is actually a DEI issue for all of us on our campus, and we have to look for ways that we can better include them in higher education. So neurodiversity is an umbrella term that classifies many learning challenges together. The basic idea of neurodiversity is that there is no normal or typical brain or learning process. This means that autism, ADHD, or other learning challenges are not abnormal. Instead, we can view these differences as a strength and as a part of the natural order of human beings. So according to Landmark College, an institution that's dedicated to neurodiverse student success, neurodiversity is a social-based ideal based on a biological fact, meaning that instead of separating people or students into normal and abnormal, neurodiversity asks us to accept and include. And that means that autism, ADHD, and learning disabilities or challenges are actually valuable forms of humans and humanity, and that they actually enrich our culture. And certainly their inclusion enriches our campuses. Let's talk for a moment about the language choices that we have when we talk about students with learning challenges. A key component to understanding neurodiverse students in college is for us to get more comfortable with language. And I think sometimes that neurodiversity or students with learning challenges can sometimes make us uncomfortable in the ways that we address students. And so we have to be really careful about the language we choose around disabilities. So what is appropriate to say? The neurodiversity movement promotes inclusive and non-judgmental language, meaning many organizations actually advocate for person-first language. And a person first is that I'm a student with ADHD, not an ADHD student. But some in the autistic community prefer the use of identity-first language, autistic student. So really, rather than as practitioners, us making assumptions, it really is best to ask the individual student about their preferred language. But for the purpose of this webinar, I will use people-first language and refer to student groups as neurodiverse, or students with learning differences, or students with learning challenges. I will not use the term disability. A key component for us to understanding neurodiverse students in college is the impact that executive functioning plays in college success. Executive function is the set of mental skills that include working memory, flexible thinking, and self-control. We use these skills every day to learn and to work and to manage daily life. For neurodiverse learners, mastery of these executive functioning skills is essential to their success. And trouble with executive function can make it hard to focus, to follow directions in the classroom, to handle their emotions, and to complete tasks. Executive function is responsible for many study skills, including paying attention in the classroom, organizing, planning, and prioritizing work, starting a task and staying focused on that task until completion, understanding different points of view, regulating their emotions, and self-monitoring or keeping track of what they're doing. All these skills we know are essential to student success in college and become a barrier for the students we work with. Another foundational definition for us before we moved on is universal design for learning. As educators, we're often challenged to design and deliver curriculum and services to diverse student populations. We know that each student learns differently, and they can benefit from having a variety of learning formats to choose from, flexible assessments, and tools to help with the organization of new information and skills. UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, is a variety of strategies and resources that help meet the diverse learning needs we encounter. It improves accessibility to learning opportunities and increases student success. UDL actually maximizes learning opportunities for all learners and reduces the need for special accommodations. UDL principles can be applied to an overall design of a course, but it can also be applied to instructional materials, strategies used in lectures, learning activities, learning resources, discussions, group work, handouts, etc. We can utilize it in our services through tutoring services or like academic coaching services. So each one of us can learn ways that we can use UDL to better help widen our information for our students. Despite higher numbers of neurodiverse students enrolling in college, their rates of success are lower than any other student groups. Research reveals that they have very low rates of disclosure, estimating about 24% of students will ever disclose to anyone on the college campus. Neurodiverse students have difficulty adjusting to college. They experience lower grade performance and GPAs. They have higher rates of class withdrawals and academic probation rates. They unfortunately have much lower rates of graduation, with an estimate of 28% completing and actually graduating from our institutions. 45% of them will report dissatisfaction with available support services. And it's interesting to note that there are a higher percentage of males versus females that are neurodiverse. So let's for a moment consider the demands higher education places on our students. New learning environments, new academic expectations, changes in peer relationships, old academic supports prove to be ineffective, and students begin to struggle to cope. Acknowledging that the student experience can often be unfriendly to students with learning differences or challenges, campus demands actually become barriers to their success. We're going to take a moment to look at 5 top barriers that our students, neurodiverse students, experience on the higher education campus. You know, for neurodiverse students, the transition to the rigor of higher education expectations and campus life is daunting. McCarthy observes that neurodiverse students may be ill-prepared and unaware of the need for self-direction in the first place. For neurodiverse students, parents can play a vital role to ensure K through 12 success, and they act as passionate advocates for their students. The roles of parents and teachers in high school accommodations and the lack of student involvement in the accommodation process often creates a barrier to success on the post-secondary campus. Today we are going to explore 5 barriers commonly experienced by our neurodiverse students. So the first area is understanding self. And I categorize this into 4 different categories of the types of students we often encounter. And I want to note first, though, and highlight that parents and teachers play such an important role in the lack of student participation in accommodation decision-making in the high school setting will leave students with a deficit in their understanding and a deficit in advocacy skills. So we are inheriting students, neurodiverse students, many of them who really don't have an understanding and lack the knowledge of their own learning processes and the things that can help them be successful. Consider some of the types of students you encounter. First, we're categorizing it as unaware. These are students who did really well in high school, that the high school supports around them made sense and provided a structure and an accountability that made sure that they were successful. The structure of high school and coursework was enough for them to be successful. Informal accommodations are sometimes given, and diagnosis or testing comes after they have begun to have academic difficulty in college. So these are students entering our campuses where they have no idea that they have any kind of learning challenges or that they would be later tested to be part of a neurodiverse student population. The next group that we deal with a lot are the ones in denial. You know, they know and they knew that they received accommodations, and most likely parents were the ones that were placing those accommodations or advocating for those accommodations, but they themselves, they just want to leave it in high school. They fear a stigma of bringing it to college with them. They want to leave any kind of medications that they may have taken or any kind of those accommodations in high school and supports behind. They believe that they have truly outgrown any of the issues they had in high school and they can go it alone. And I'm sure as I describe this type of student in denial, that you all have encountered this student many times. And unfortunately, we often encounter them after they've experienced academic difficulty and they need our support to recover their academic standing. And then we have the limited advocate. This is a student who does know that they have learning challenges, but they lack the advocacy skills necessary for them to be able to navigate a college campus and its supports. They allowed or had parents who were proactive in advocating for them, but they really don't have an understanding or a knowledge of their learning strengths and their learning challenges. They lack the maturity and communication skills needed for advocacy on the college campus. And they often will register with our disability support areas, but really don't use the services. And the last group that we love to work with the most is our active advocates. And I say that because these are students who come in prepared to engage with us as campus partners. They know and understand their own learning strengths and challenges. They know and use accommodations and supports. They seek those out. And they come to us advocating openly for themselves. But they're rare, unfortunately, on our college campus. The barrier 2, experiences with faculty and staff. Neurodiverse students report difficulty with faculty and support offices. With faculty, they're often reluctant to disclose or seek accommodations at all. They struggle with the college classroom environment that's full of unknown norms, social norms, and distractions. Remember the executive functioning skills we talked about? Well, neurodiverse learners often lack executive functioning skills, and they lack the skills that are needed to assist them in completing multi-step assignments, and also the communication skills and the on-task skills that are needed for working in groups. Well, navigating offices, and many of us are representing learning centers today, navigating campus offices like our own is challenging and requires effective communication and scheduling skills. So neurodiverse students often lack the communication and task completion skills, and that makes our offices unwelcoming. Information is too often supplied in only one format. Engaging with staff can actually induce high anxiety for these students, Remember, they relied on their parents to play this role in high school, so approaching us for support can be very challenging. The work of Cherelle Strayhorn on student belonging for at-risk student groups highlights the essential function that belonging plays in achieving academic success. For many neurodiverse students, communication with peers and the establishment of friendships is very difficult. Coming to campus lacking in social skills, students remain isolated and disconnected from campus life. Social isolation can quickly lower their levels of motivation and persistence. Campus learning environments, like our own, can often be unwelcoming spaces for neurodiverse students. The structural and design elements of open commons areas challenge students with sensory issues. Access to quiet or low distraction areas are often difficult to locate. Students enter campus unprepared to adapt and to cope with the learning environments, the new learning environments that they are navigating, and with the new academic expectations before them. Campus faculty and staff, we often lack the awareness to help, and we don't know how to offer assistance. A student's willingness to disclose to someone on campus or ask for accommodations is often determined by the response of that first disclosure. So it's so important that we adopt supported language and we seek to understand learning needs. So if that first disclosure does not go well with a faculty member, those students report that they will be unwilling to disclose to others on campus. And the last barrier, look at connecting to supportive services like our own. Neurodiverse students report connecting to support services is challenging for them and find many of our campus offices very unwelcoming. They struggle to adapt and navigate to the steps required to access our services. For example, at ECU, until our implementation to academia, ECU students had to either come into our center to make an appointment, call us, or email us to make service appointments. We recognized that this process was a barrier to support services for many of our students. And that truly was one of the main reasons that we were seeking out a new system, and academia was that system that allowed a wider access. So I encourage you that we all have to ask ourselves, what processes have we put in place that seem reasonable, but actually work as a barrier to students? It seems reasonable that we would ask a student to call us to make an appointment, but it does not account for the anxiety that it builds in our neurodiverse students, and actually other students as well, and that we're finding new ways to be able to widen that access for them. So I would encourage you to consider asking your students how access is actually working for them. You may be surprised by some of their answers, and it will have to prompt a response from you in changing some of the access points to your services. It did for us. Now, before I move on, are there any questions that I can answer?
All right, we've had a couple of questions come in. So let me get to those. So one of our first question is, I am a disabled combat veteran and I like your approach to language. Which executive function skill do you think is the most important?
It honestly is on such a level of individualism with a student. You know, some of the research will show if you can't work through a multi-level assignment and you are unable to get assignments in on time, you are simply as a student not going to perform on the academic rigor that you need to. And it becomes a very big stumbling block for students. And it's really the independence of doing that. It is, the good news is executive functioning can be a learned skill. It's one that we can coach and support and help a student do better. But a great predictor for, we'll say traditional, is there traditional anymore, but a traditional freshman coming in, an 18 or 19-year-old coming into campus, is if mom or dad or other parent supports played a huge role in organizing them and navigating through their assignments. If you had to do that as a parent in their junior and senior years, we've got to address a deficit in executive functioning before they enter campus. Because we suddenly think they got accepted to the institution, they met the criteria, oh, they must be able to do it. And so many students fall into having academic difficulty because they were just never transitioned to go it alone. They're not ready for that independence. So I would challenge all of us to figure out, and I'll talk a little bit about what ECU is doing to stand in that gap. But there's definitely going to be a gap for students in that to be able to then adapt to the university setting. And I love that you brought up military affiliated students who may come to us with learning challenges. Some have entered the military because of some of those learning challenges that they may have experienced in high school. Some are coming to us with challenges that have occurred because of military service, and they have to learn a new process and a new way to adapt to school. And that is on such an individualized level. But I would encourage that there's ways that we can make connections and support those students with professional staff coaching them as they begin to learn new workarounds for how they learn and how they can best adapt to the classroom.
I'm muted there. Okay, and the next question, the vast majority of the neurodiverse students that I encounter are in the denial category. What would you recommend when it comes to helping those students?
I agree with you that they are in the denial category. And unfortunately, we often find them or begin to work with them after they've experienced some academic difficulty. So for ECU, we're out there ahead of it as much as we can, proactively talking in orientation about our services and mentioning the kinds of supports that we can do. I'm going to talk a little bit about a learning community that we've created, but we ask students to apply to it and tell us a little bit about their high school experience. And often we are able through that process to see that they received accommodations, and we can get ahead of it and just be honest that this is going to be a challenging transition. Another element is viewing parents as our partners rather than an adversary. So parents have played such an important role in advocating for their students through K through 12, allow them a transition point. So we actually have on our website a parent referral form, and we allow a parent, and I mention it, and my staff mentions it in orientation, and so we talk a lot about it so that a parent feels comfortable tipping us off that their student may struggle. So maybe the student in the beginning lacks the awareness or maturity to not be in a denial state. We can then get ahead of that and work with the student and ask parents for their background. Tell us a little bit about the student, so then we can work with the students and have a lot more knowledge. We begin a partnership with parents rather than tell them to not be involved at all.
And then Emery asks, can you discuss the role stigma, real or perceived, may play in student reluctance to disclose? How can we best respond to that fear? Do you consider disclosure to be necessary for students to receive UDL-based supports?
No, that's kind of a two-pronged question, and I love it. And the one on stigma, we have to remove stigma from help-seeking, period, on a college campus. And in a moment, I'm going to show you some photos of our center and the ways that we encountered removing stigma from using tutoring services, for example, from coming in and feeling comfortable enough to, admit that I need help in some ways. So often our females come to us with much more open perspectives on help seeking. Our young men who have a higher proportion of learning challenges are, that's interesting to see that research. They're going to stay in that denial. They don't want to ask for help, so many of them, until they're in trouble. We would all love to be proactive and catch them as they're coming in so that they're never in an academic hole at all and they're never having that difficulty. But often it's the way that we respond to them and the openness that we have. I think also as we present ourselves on campus and we are doing classroom presentations, to speak in a language that allows students to be comfortable with us, but also sometimes we need to experience or speak from the experiences that we've had ourselves. So not coming across as so perfect allows students to feel more comfortable to disclose to us. And if they're in a situation where they have to disclose something to others, sometimes we are helping them role model that. And we talk that through or work through that so they feel more comfortable than communicating with others on campus. It's certainly a built up skill that we can work on. And I don't recall the UDL. And could you repeat the UDL part of the question?
Yep. Do you consider disclosure to be necessary for students to receive UDL-based supports?
I love that question because it's going to segue into our next section, but no. The point of universal design for learning and to make sure that we're using it, but also our students who are providing services are using it, is that the whole idea is that we don't need to know. That then the ways that we are presenting materials and varying the ways that we present materials means different people in the room are going to capture that information in different ways based on their learner variability. And I, as a tutor, I don't ever need to know. But if I stick to one way of communicating, then I am disenfranchising some of the students that come to me for service. So love that question. Thank you for that, because I'd like for us to talk a little bit about what we discovered at ECU.
And at this point, it's been almost actually 10 minutes of questions. We've had a lot of questions come in. Like I said at the start, for those of you who weren't here, we have limited time for questions today, but Dr. Coghill will be happy to respond to you all via email for any questions we don't get to today. So it's, I think at this point, would you like to keep going?
Yeah, that would be great. And I promise to be able to interact with you into next week and answer those emails.
And we really appreciate that, and we will be keeping track of all the questions and forwarding them to her.
So our UDL question was a great segue into, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, because I can't.
Oh, it's indicate a question in the chat. It's still on that slide.
Screen?
It is not changed. It's still the slide.
I don't see the slide. I'm sorry, everybody. All I see is me. I would rather not do that.
Maybe stop sharing and reshare your screen. See if that helps.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. It says RY.
Yay. Good.
Okay.
Thank you. Phew, got a little nervous there for a moment. So let's talk a little bit about East Carolina University, or more directly on how our Learning Center has responded to some of the things that we've been talking about. You know, as director of the Pirate Academic Success Center at East Carolina University, part of my position is to set some vision and goals for student success services on our campus. Staying aware of campus success measures and gaps, in academic progression and looking at our work with neurodiverse students, it really has made us examine the services setup and the way that we approach our services and access. And actually, not only does it benefit neurodiverse students, it benefits all students. So just like a design, when you think about a design of a building, and we've got ramps going in, and those ramps were added to allow and to assist individuals with physical challenges, others will benefit from those ramps as well. Maybe those that we never really intended, that original intention of access. So if we apply that lens, that same kind of lens to learning centers and other campus supports, that means we have to examine how do students engage with our services, how are we designing our practices and processes to best widen access and supports for students. This doesn't just make sense from our center view, but it makes sense so much for our institution as we start looking at how it impacts retention rates and persistent rates. And on the student level, the changes that we can make can foster the student's ability to master essential success skills and transfer those into the classroom. So real quickly, who we are, Pirate Academic Success Center at East Carolina University. We are the centralized learning center on our campus for undergraduates. We are a part of academic affairs and we report to the Chief Academic Officer for Student Success and the Vice Chancellor for Academic Operations in our Provost office. We've been serving the ECU campus for 15 years, and we have grown to provide a holistic view of academic success services that include tutoring. We have a call center for freshmen, academic coaching services, both professional and peer, special populations programming and support. At-risk learning communities are embedded within our center. Those focus on neurodiverse freshmen, Gear Up NC grant students, transfer students, Greek life, and other students that are in academic recovery. So our work began actually in 2012 when we started to explore university design for learning. When I was first exposed to UDL, or University Design for Learning, I wasn't hooked initially until I started to see the connection that it had to the at-risk students that we were serving. At that time, my aha moment was this place of learner variability. And it really became the meeting place between how we work with neurodiverse students or students with learning challenges, how are we working with academically at-risk students, and seeing what are we doing. UDL is often an answer for that, that we can embrace learner variability, which actually is that the acceptance that all individuals are unique in the way that we learn. So each student brings to us a different learning profile to the classroom, to our learning center or campus environment. And some of the next things we'll talk about will really meet that and meet that need. So let's take a moment just to think about who that successful student is when we encounter them on campus. When we consider the attribute of a successful student, especially students who may have learning challenges, much of the success surrounds in their own ability to understand their own learning processes and be able to advocate or communicate on their behalf. This proactive approach is really what we want all students to achieve in college, but for our neurodiverse students, it is the greatest predictor of their success. So can they move from the advocacy of parents and teachers and begin to openly advocate for themselves and identify their learning process and the ability of what their strengths are when they learn and the things that they may need to build up or enhance? So our biggest question is, how can we then support their transition to advocacy and independence. So let's go back to the student types that we talked about just in a minute ago. But I've actually added one more, the invisible student. So let's talk a moment about the kinds of supports that we can leverage for these types of students. So our first type of student was the ones that, remember, were unaware. So this is the student we work with that did fine in high school, but once in college courses, everything begins to unravel. We often find these students from our work within academic recovery support services. For some students, and I'm not saying all students who experiencing academic difficulty are neurodiverse, but for some students, using support services like our tutoring and academic coaching is a challenge for them. That we have to help them with building the communication skills and help-seeking behaviors. We have to help them adopt an academic structure and a high accountability to the ways that they're approaching school. Help them develop an understanding of themselves as a learner. And for some of these students, assistance may be needed in exploring testing services on or off campus. So let's go to our denial. And I agree, there's many students in this category. They believe that they have outgrown their learning challenges and they want to leave it behind them. That was so in high school. Often seeking help after academic struggles, denial students need our help in coming to terms with their learning challenges. They need help with understanding learning preferences and what best meets their needs. They need help with establishing a connection with disability support services and accommodations and using that connection. They need help from us in using academic support services and achieving an acceptance and understanding of themselves as learners. And they need help with mastering the ability to advocate for themselves. As I mentioned in the question that I answered, we found parents to be great allies in helping a student better understand themselves as a learner and to build advocacy skills that are independent of their parents. So the added area or the added profile of a student is the invisible student. And that's the student who's basically invisible on campus. They may or may not ever become connected to our campus support services. This student attends class, but they often struggle with executive functioning skills. They lack communication skills to advocate for their own support needs or seek help. They never thrive on campus. They never thrive with making peer relationships or with joining campus organizations or connecting with campus support teams. These are the students who leave quietly. We only really notice their name because it shows up on a retention report. And by when that happens, it's just too late. They were invisible the whole time they were on our campus. Now, the student that we can make great strides with is that student also that's limited in their advocacy. This is one who they know they need support services. They knew what they received in high school, but they really have never had to have a voice to it or advocate for themselves. Parents played that key role of advocate in high school. So these are students that maybe in their senior year, they made an attempt to have their student understand more about their needs and communicate for help, but that the student isn't working independently in understanding those connections. We can play a significant role in helping them gain the needed skills to succeed and better help them understand and accept themselves. Some of that is by linking them to people, our colleagues in disability support. Some of that is practicing advocacy and helping them understand ways to communicate on campus. and that promotion of advocacy can make a big difference in how successful they are. I've also added the need for social connections to this and to the next student profile. It's recognizing that challenging nature of peer relationship for some of our students, we can play a big role in establishing belonging and friendship. So our last student, the active advocate, love these, have very few students in mind sometimes when I think of an active advocate. This student is kind of rare on campus. They took over the advocacy responsibilities in high school, so they are ready to steer that whole process for themselves in college. They know how to ask and receive supports. They're open to help seeking. They possess a much deeper knowledge of learning processes than other students. But what we have observed at East Carolina is even if that student has come in to our institution knowing exactly what they need to be academically successful, we've noticed that there is often a disconnect when it comes to peer relationships and building friendships, that's an area they struggle with. And that's an area often overlooked, but we can play a role in fostering that and supporting it as well. So I'm going to take a moment. I'd like to take a moment for us to look at 4 specific kinds of things or initiatives that, based off this information in the research, that we did to change business at the Pirate Academic Success Center at East Carolina. So our first one's going to be within learning center environment or the design. So when we talk about campus spaces, our original design of our space was influenced by collaborative learning. We had goals for universal design for learning and active learning approaches. We wanted the space to be open. When we talked a little bit about having stigma, we wanted to remove the stigma and shame to tutoring and academic support services. We wanted a student to see other students being tutored so that they felt that it was much more acceptable on our campus. But when we were researching the needs of neurodiverse college students, when I walked the floor at a peak time and looked around the center, I had to adopt a little bit different perspective. Yes, we met the goal of providing adaptable, collaborative spaces. We have UDL being used and learning techniques being supported, but it was full of noise and distractions. We were missing a space that for less distraction, the space wasn't functioning for everyone, especially our neurodiverse learners. So we added some low distraction environments adjacent to our main floor. We have tutors and tutees both like this option. Remember, some of our staff, our student staff, are neurodiverse as well. So we added those spaces. And we train and work with our tutors and our staff so that we view space and furniture as part of the learning tool. We can adapt to the function and the use of the space daily by moving aspects of our center and keeping it flexible. I would encourage you to consider a few things about your space. Explore or look for sensory zoning or transition areas for your space. If you're in the position to plan, think about zones that help a student move from a more active space to a quieter space, that they can make those choices. Implement, if you can, the use of sensory rooms or escape spaces, quieter spots, and giving them open areas as well. Always purchase furniture with adaptation and mobility in mind. Make it so it can be movable, and begin to anticipate all student needs in your designs. So let's talk for a moment about how we had to relook at student staff training. Our learning center is certified with the College Reading and Learning Association levels 1 through 3 in both mentoring or peer educator and tutoring programs. As our staff learned more about neurodiversity, this topic and support approaches were blended into our training program. You know, I believe that adding neurodiversity and learner variability and adding that lens to our training has made it richer and allows for very meaningful conversations and discussions about pedagogy, about learning preferences, and support designs that we can incorporate into our services. So I encourage all of you to take a moment and review your training program. Look for opportunities to engage with your student staff on this topic. You'll be glad that you did. It will make it a much richer staff training. In tutor training, we also discussed the tools that tutors have and their decision-making happening to support learner variability or learner preferences. Teaching tutors to adapt tools and influencing the ways that student learners interact with course content materials is a cornerstone to them supporting independent learning of their tutees. So we have videos, apps, OneNote, games like Kahoot, whiteboards, and space that tutors can adapt and address to the groups and to the tutoring session that they're holding and the learner needs of their groups. And just like the question we have, UDL then begins to address the learner variability in that group without the need for disclosure. Technology tools. Throughout our space, we're using LCD monitors and Air media to connect our monitors to devices so that students or tutors can use those as shown in the picture. So we are providing these services and these supports to our student staff and training them. Our teams produce tools too. So tutors record course content videos using our LMS system in Canvas. Videos are available on Canvas for all students to watch weekly on course concepts. Our capability to use OneNote, Microsoft OneNote, has influenced our resiliency. It helped us stay very resilient during COVID and really has allowed us to be able to adapt to the different learning environments we've been dealing with over the last several years. So look at another. So we wanted to make sure that we were widening access service to our services. We looked at a website redesign. So being able to, on our website, communicate with our students in multiple ways. So that's adding videos, graphics, text, and forms. So we're giving that information to students in multiple ways for them to interact with us. Remember, that was one of the things that neurodiverse students said, that they struggled to interact with our centers because we were really providing materials only in one way for them. We've incorporated what's called a micro moment. So if you're familiar with micro moments, I know I'm going a little long, I'll just keep going. Rachel, we're good. Micro moments is actually when you will create very short recordings about a particular process. So we found that to be incredibly effective. So we've been doing micro moments and putting them on our website, how to make an appointment with us, or how to register for classes, or schedule an appointment with their advisor. All kinds of short video clips that are very short and designed to walk a student through those steps and give them another way to engage with our services. As I mentioned, academia was part of us in an effort to widen access for our learning center for the students that using our center. We found that not only neurodiverse students, but a lot of our students get a lot of anxiety when they're asked to make a phone call to us. And remember, that was the way students were interacting to make appointments. So it created a barrier. So by removing that and having online appointment access, not only is our staff happy with less phone calls coming into the center, but we're seeing students really enjoy the process of making an online appointment. And so we're really grateful that while we used a new service to in our focus on neurodiverse support, we actually are able to have a new way to connect with us, and it makes it easier for all students. And that's the win. The last area I really want to spend a couple of minutes on, so hang in there with me, is on building support teams. Because I think that we have to really focus on the ways that we're communicating and supporting our students. A student, as they transition to our campus, had a support team in high school. They had teachers or parents. There was always somebody that kind of was in the high school that was their go-to person. And they have to rebuild that when they transition to our college campus. So this fourth area that we had to really focus on was how do we build that support team for the students and build those relationships for students as they're transitioning onto our campus. One way is we have dedicated a freshman learning community specifically for neurodiverse learners. This learning community focuses on awareness, advocacy, on building executive functioning skills, and active learning within the students in it. All classroom experiences and assignments are scaffolded for students. We will celebrate basic achievements, and we celebrate them as wins along the way. You went to class, all classes this week. That's a win. We've added a layer of high accountability and structure through grade tracking and frequent meetings with the students in this learning community. We solicit the help of parents in better understanding the learning needs of their students, and then the learning needs, and we do that through a learning needs survey or consultations with those parents. We seek to help students gain the independence and advocacy in their first year that's needed for them to propel them through the next 4. And it's important to note that many of these center activities that we host, learning community students are invited to, and some of them are designed to support them. So the one picture that you can see on the right side of your screen is of a Thanksgiving event that we invited them to, and it was a great way for them to make friendships and connection. Our learning center support model consists of some elements that we have found is very effective for all at-risk student groups, but especially neurodiverse students. So while I would love to go deeper into our learning center support model, that actually would be another webinar. And so what I want to take a high level view, a little bit of the services that we provide, and just note that we have several learning communities. We invite our freshmen into, first-time freshmen into those learning community experiences. They last for the full first year of their freshman year. We recruit during the spring and summer before their fall enrollment. But for neurodiverse students, we increase the frequency of support. We cohort them in a common freshman seminar class. We increase their interactions with professional staff. We maintain high accountability. As I mentioned, that's through watching attendance. That's through our early alert system that we have at ECU, and that's through grade tracking. We encourage friendships and look for ways that service and employment can support their engagement. All these students participate in peer academic coaching and will work with a professional staff member. We work to build executive functioning skills through the first year. We want to increase their use of disability support services and acceptance of the use. We work to learn, help them learn academic skills and master competencies in the classroom. And we add a structure of accountability through those regular meetings and those connections to them. And lastly, we want to make sure that we give them plenty of opportunities to engage with their peers. The last little piece of addressing some of the needs of neurodiverse students is finding a way for them to belong. we have really been able to establish some great peer relationships and support that establishment through engagement with our center, either through employment, finding a role that they can play and that we, through paid employment with us, or through service roles, incorporating them into outreach so that they're involved on our team. And that in that process of being a part of a team, that's incredibly powerful. It can make the difference for a student between belonging and isolation. Last quick piece. I know that some of the things that I have quickly talked about cost money. And I know that many of us are having tighter and tighter operating budgets. I have never been the queen of a big ask. Like, I've never gotten a big grant that has come in. It's all been very small, like mini grants that we've been able to take advantage of. So I just encourage you to think about the campus partners rather than going for big requests or grants. There may be some things happening in your state. There may be partners on campus that you can connect with. We have used our Parents Council to support some of the technology that we needed. And we've been able to receive funds from our SGA, our student government on our campus, to help get us started. We've maintained some of the work through a relationship with our academic technologies group and tapping into some of the technology fees that our students pay every year. So there's lots of campus-based supports that you can get connected to that can really make a difference. In order to do that, I would just encourage you that after this session, certainly look at some of the information. You're going to receive the PowerPoint to be able, it's been a lot of information in a very short period of time, but you'll be able to review that, look at some of that information, work with your team to create a vision. And when you create that vision goal, then be ready to tell your story and the reason why everywhere that you go. I worked on creating funding proposal sheets, so those were ready. I always keep a wish list for one-time money opportunities that come about this time of year. We have those on our campus. Start to develop some relationships with partners. I found that often partners needed proof that the money or the service was going directly to students, and I could trade their money, their funding, for our student usage data. So always know that you have that to leverage. Watch for statewide mini grants. Those have been really, really helpful, and I try every time I see those pop. When you establish a track record of producing results on your campus, that's your way to be able to turn around and get funding. So hang in there with that. I recognize that it can always be really challenging. And I've also learned to always rotate funding sources. I never ask one source, like the Parents Council. I'm not going to go to them every year for support, but every 2 or 3. It might be a big initiative, and that'll be the year we'll go for support, and we have a better chance of receiving it when we look at it that way. So I want to close with why I do this. Why is this important? And why is this work important? So I told you that we began some of our work with Universal Design for Learning way back in 2012. And my aha moment at that point was looking at learner variability and how that connected within our tutoring center. But honestly, I had no idea where this journey was going to take me professionally or personally. So UDL became that larger inquiry into ways that we could serve lots of different learners within our center. And we began to envision ways that we could support students and then recognize the growing number of neurodiverse students who were admitted to ECU. This was at the same time that my own son enrolled in college. He was the one who didn't know. He never was diagnosed in the K through 12 system. The lack of supports in college quickly impacted his ability to succeed. Research brought to light many similarities in his experience and shared characteristics to college students with learning differences. At the age of 20, he was diagnosed with ADHD and slow processing skills. Like many other neurodiverse students, he gained admission to college, but left with no degree attainment. And I know he's not alone. He was the invisible student. Today, as you review barriers to student success and explore program options, I'm so thankful that you have chosen to spend some time examining the ways that you can promote change on your campus. As an educator and as a parent advocate, please take the time to notice these students on your campus. Your work is so essential to their success. This work motivated my husband and I as a co-author to work on a handbook of sorts for college leadership. And it's the book that we worked on and was published through COVID, during the time of COVID. It is really a handbook, and we have a collection of experts throughout the nation who work with neurodiverse students and take a practical view of the things that we can do with space, with training. All those issues are covered within this book, what happens in campus living, etc. We've also created, and my husband is a librarian at ECU and has helped create a LibGuide. So much of the research that we've talked about today comes from that LibGuide, and I've added some information on why neurodiversity is a DEI initiative, and that's added to that LibGuide. So I encourage you to go to both those sources and take your own journey and see where that takes you in the support of neurodiverse students on your campus. As we said, I am completely willing for you to contact me. The work that we talked about today is not just work that I'm doing. There is a whole staff at the Pirate Academic Success Center that I am so grateful to, that caught the vision as well and continue to catch the vision on how we can help neurodiverse students. And they're not parents of neurodiverse students. They're people on campus just like you who care enough to stand in the gap. So thank you so much. I know this went a little bit long, but I hope that it was incredibly helpful for you today.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Coghill, and of course, thank you everybody who's still with us, and those of you who have left or who are watching this recording later. Like I said, we are going to be sending out the recording, and we didn't have time for too many questions today, but we are gonna be submitting the questions to Dr. Coghill for her to answer you privately. And then let me just go ahead and share our final our final slide here on our end.
Okay.
And yep, so if you do have any additional questions, you can email those to Dr. Coghill or myself, and you can also contact me if you're interested in a free trial, a free semester trial of academia. And thank you everybody for being with us today. It was great to see so many of you in here, and we hope to see you at our next session.
Thank you so much.
Bye everyone.